Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, we've got something completely unique and different. I just wanted to flag up as well. This is an introduction for World Game Changers and a conversation with my ex-partner, Paul Lowe, around consciously uncoupling. And welcome to you, Paul.
Thanks very much. It feels really strange, this does, but in a really beautiful way too. This is, as I say, going to be repurposed from the World Game Changers podcast under the banner of Friends After Lovers. And it seems so strange talking to you in this kind of professional, under this professional banner, as two former lovers that are now have become very, very, very close friends. It just seems surreal. It feels beautiful at the same time.
It certainly does. And I think for the benefit of the audience, I think the reason we wanted to have this conversation is to let people know, there is life after separation sort of thing.
Yeah, very much so. But what's really interesting for me, and I agree with that, yes, definitely. But actually, it goes so much further because, I can only speak, obviously, as one half of this particular dance, but the relationship that we've got from my heart now is extremely sacred, and you can put it under the banner of deep friendship or whatever you. So, yes, I agree with that generally, your statement, but I think there's so much more to be had as well.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. So for the benefit of the audience, how would you sum up what consciously uncoupling actually means to you, Paul?
Phew, blimey. And how long have we got on this episode? Blimey, what a question that is. You could have, see what this is getting your own back, isn't it? For all those years of conflict. And I use that term very loosely. What does that mean? Consciously uncoupling. I mean, I suppose in its most kind of starkest, obvious way, it's, we're separating, we're parting, we've come to the end of the road. We're conscious of that. But actually, the uncoupling takes it to another dimension because not only we're separating in, what the outside world might deem a romantic stroke couple scenario, but it's actually all the emotions that go with it, isn't it? You're separating those emotions out. Because I think it's one thing separating and saying, okay, we'll split the bank account, we'll split this, we'll split the assets, blah, blah, blah. That's one thing. But to then try and separate and split out your emotions, that's a different kettle of fish altogether, I think. And so when you uncouple, and I really do like that word, you uncouple, it's... I've certainly found it to be, and I'll just use the word. I'm gonna use a get out of jail word. Interesting, how that's unfolded for me.
Yeah, totally resonate. And I think for the benefit of the audience, I'd just like to mention that Paul and I were together for 10 years, but we've been separated 4 years now, but remained very amicable. And obviously, initially, there was those moments of angst. I can't say it was all sweet and light and a bed of roses initially, but we sort of ironed those out fairly quickly, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, because I think, this brings in the question of love, doesn't it? It's a wonderful, for me, in my world, it is the ultimate energy. And I think the love takes on a different, I don't even know what the word is. I mean, how do you define love? We have love for, our family, our friends, maybe even our car, our possessions, that kind of thing. We have a different kind of love for our pets, our partners, and, all these kind of different categories that we we kind of pigeonhole, don't we? And we segment our love. We give it a label, we give it a name, we give it a box to live in. And I've kind of questioned this over the years, even before this, that love really is the energy that radiates from within us. And then we kind of, I suppose, choose where we're going to direct that love. Is this a romantic relationship that that kind of aligns with, let's say, sexual activity, for as one example, because it's more deeply physically intimate. So we kind of make those conscious choices, but at its core, irrespective of what the dynamic of love is, I believe that comes from within and it just radiates out, and we kind of then sort of give it a label or channel it into a certain direction. And there's a whole host of things then that go with those respective specifics, whether that's love for our children, love for our family, or whatever, our possessions, our pets, whatever that may be. Does that kind of make any sense?
Yeah, I think there is definitely different forms of love, and there's different feelings associated with those different forms of love, isn't there?
Yeah. But I think what's materialized for me is, strip out the label romantic, because we're not a couple anymore. But my love for you I think is actually increased, because there's no expectation that we'll be sharing a bed or we'll be doing this together as a couple. I think it gives you that opportunity. It's given me that opportunity to really go inward in love in a general sense, and more specifically where you're concerned. So, well, what does this really mean? What does it really mean? And I think when you kind of come from that, what is it that I've got? What do I stand for? What do I stand against? Me. And it kind of purifies things, because you're not then having to factor in another party and an expectation that, because we're a couple, I've got to do this, or I should have, would have, could have done that. You kind of stand alone, which then actually gives you that power to give love to a person or a pet or whatever it may be, to channel it in a way that this is me and I choose to give you this. And that's certainly unfolded in my world generally, and certainly in the specifics of us, to use your word, uncoupling.
Yeah, absolutely. So how would you, I suppose, for the benefit of the audience, describe the difference between somebody that's unconsciously separating and uncoupling to what we did, which was very much around consciously uncoupling?
So how would I describe the difference between the two?
Yes.
I think if there's that unconscious element there, that creates chaos, because you're then trapped in all the emotions. I mean, as you've already alluded to, our separation wasn't, all rainbows and unicorns. There was that niggle, there was that hurt on both sides. There was that grieving, as for something in the main, which was certainly very powerful. But we had, as you've alluded to, we'd kind of come to the end of the road. We'd helped each other grow so much that actually I think we'd helped each other grow apart, which kind of sounds really zany, doesn't it? But to go back to the difference between the conscious and the unconscious, I think it's, the self-observation is key. To have that ability to look at yourself in the equation and ask yourself, why are we doing this? Is it just a sort of a lover's tiff? Is it relatively superficial, an ego-driven lover's tiff? Or is it an understanding from consciousness that we've come to a different place in our lives as individuals, and as such, we're maybe no longer aligned in a way that we thought we were initially? And I think that's the big difference, because to have that understanding helps to create a bit of a more conscious route map, an exit, and to navigate through all the stormy emotions that prevail. Because without that, you're trapped in emotion. If you don't know why, you just know you've got to do it, but you don't really know why or how. That for me is chaos, and that magnifies the confusion and the hurt even more and more and more, and prolongs it as well.
I mean, we've met so many couples that have been in awe of how well we've done in terms of our way that we've managed to consciously uncouple relatively unscathed, albeit like you said, there were those niggles initially, which we ironed out. But yeah, it's been a good journey, and I think it's worthwhile sharing that with audience members who might be in a situation where they're considering it might be best for them to separate and how best to do that. And there's no way that I don't think anybody, if you've been in a situation where you've shared the love of an intimate relationship, where you can come out totally without any hurt feelings, and unless unless you're a robot, but you can certainly navigate it to a point where there will be a little bit of pain here and there, but you can let that go pretty quickly and pretty easily.
I mean, yeah, communication. And it's such an obvious one, isn't it? I mean, it's blatantly obvious to say that as humans, if we can communicate more, things will be so much better. And begs the question, why on earth don't we communicate? Because I think as humans, generally speaking, we're poor at communicating. And that's a mass general statement to make, of course, that covers a multitude of things. But I really do think so. And that kind of nicely leads into, if I may be allowed to kind of share what lessons, the legacy of our uncoupling, if you like, what would I do different in my next relationship? What would I take forward? And communication is absolutely key. Absolutely key. And I repeat yet again, listeners, well, Paul, that is such an obvious statement to make. Yes, it is. But boy, I think generally speaking, as humans, and we have to be careful of generalizations, of course, we're poor. We're poor at communicating our thoughts, our feelings, particularly the more, yet again, at the risk of generalizing, the more masculine energy. We push it, it'll be all right, don't make a fuss about it. We suppress it, we put it down. And then, of course, like everything, it will come out eventually. And when it comes out, it usually explodes and ends up in something quite catastrophic. So for me, I suppose what I'm trying to say as a result of lessons learned from this 4 years that, we've been since we split, is to have a good look at me, a really good look at me. How do I show up in a relationship? What part was I responsible for creating hurt, confusion, miscommunication? What part did I show up in our relationship? And that, that can be a tough place to be. As we know, when we look in the mirror and, one or two truths are coming back. Oh, yeah, but, it wasn't me that much. It wasn't me. It was her, which is the easy get out of jail card. It's not good enough. So for me, what that's taught me is that when I go into my next relationship, it will be with that commitment of to talk and communicate every step of the way. And even if I'm feeling off or down, or I feel triggered, or, by something my partner said, it's going to be put on the table straight away. And that for me is a big, big, big lesson learned.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we communicate, even if we're, I suppose, thinking that it might cause a disagreement, I mean, we can always choose a time and a place whereby we can communicate and say, look, we need to have a difficult conversation, and this is how I feel, without it getting nasty, can't we?
Yeah, and I suppose that there's a humour alert here, and certainly as I watch Lyn smile, she knows what's coming. Well, I'm asking permission to share my humour, which usually goes down like a lead balloon. I've certainly mentioned it before in the World Game Changers podcast episode. So I don't know if your listeners may or may not appreciate it. I'll bow down to you being the host on your podcast on this.
Absolutely, go for it.
Right, okay. So it's this. So as World Game Changers listeners will know, I've been sort of in a former life very aligned with football, professional football in the UK, and particularly my allegiances lied to a certain team in Nottingham called Nottingham Forest. And they had for 18 years, had a very, very well-known manager called Brian Clough. Now, Cloughie was, in my humble opinion, a genius, not just in football, but in life. He was way ahead of his time with his statements, his philosophies, but he was very, very much misunderstood. because he was labelled a loudmouth, he was brash, he was arrogant, he was opinionated, obnoxious, blah, 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 blah. However, the point of this attempt at humour is this, and I tried this on Lyn during our kind of our relationship, and it went down like a lead balloon time after. It didn't stop me trying, because apparently God loves a trier, and as Lyn said, I was very trying. Cloughie used to say, so a player would come and knock on his door on a Monday morning after the game at the weekend and say, boss, I scored a hat-trick, or I scored the winning goal, or whatever it was, I want a pay rise. And Cloughie had an answer, and it was the same answer that anybody that come into Cloughie's office to talk about potential conflict, why haven't you picked me for the first team, boss, blah, blah, blah. And Cloughie's response was this: we'd talk about it for 2 minutes, and then we would decide I was right. So, I tried this one on Lyn, and I'll repeat again, listeners, it didn't even get off the ground.
I can confirm that 100%. Yeah. So yeah, that was laid on me, like you said, quite a few times, and I wasn't having none of it.
Yeah.
Because my response to that was, I'll let you have the last word as long as it's yes, dear.
And I was being, grammatically, well, actually, I don't want to be pedantic, but that's 2 words. As I exited out the door rapidly because a slipper was heading my way.
Okay, so if we've got people listening that are in that, I suppose, difficult spot where they know that their relationship has run its course, and usually we know that quite some time before we actually have those difficult conversations, don't we? What would your advice be to them, Paul?
We've already mentioned communication. No apologies, listeners, for, really repeating that. Keep talking. But the other significant thing, and this brings in, and I'll say our 3 sacred souls, find some middle ground. You know that, rather than it being 2 individuals that are polarized, find something in the middle that, create something humorous, something warm, something loving. And I don't mean use the kids as kind of bargaining tools either. And so let's give this some context. So, and I know this wasn't part of our sort of, if you like, strategy or technique when we uncoupled, but I've thought about this since, and I want to kind of flag up, if I may, 3 beautiful, beautiful feline souls that go by the name of Magic, Madam, and Miracle. Your three felines. As I'm sure you will attest, the amount of love and joy that we share through this, I'll use the term middle ground, this 3rd collective entity, is been beyond amazing. And I've kind of thought about that. I mean, obviously our love and our connection with those souls is just undeniable. It's profound in the extreme. And by the way, listeners, this is from a guy that doesn't like cats, apparently, allegedly.
I remember you saying that quite clearly and adamantly, and now he's actually besotted with my 3 cats.
Yeah, there's just something. So, to bring that in, find that something. I use they could be a metaphoric love box. It's something or someone, or probably some things that sit outside the 2 individuals, because I think once it's just the 2 siloed individuals, it becomes an ego-driven, I'm right, you're wrong scenario. Whereas if you've got something in the middle to pour that love into, humorously, and say, look, I'll give it a thing is, so imagine that we were turning the clock back 4 years and those beautiful felines were on the scene. It's like, yeah, do you know what, babe? We're going to be splitting up. So I wonder what our children think about it. Our children, and this is the injecting the energy of humor. Our children being the 3 felines. Create something. Create this middle ground fantasy, and use that as a basis for humor, because humor is a massive, massive diffuser of angst, as we know. And that's something that I think it's a bit close to the bone, maybe with children, which is the obvious one. And maybe I'm being a bit too subjective here, but I turn the clock back and think, wow, if we was going through this again, that niggle that we had, I'm sure we wouldn't have had this. We wouldn't have had it, with this kind of, I don't want to call it a strategy or tactic, but pouring our love into a third entity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a good angle to approach it from. And I think for the benefit of the listeners, they ought to give you a little bit of context about the cats, because I actually acquired them post our separation. Literally, it's just over 18 months ago now. They were 3 abandoned 6 to 7 week old kittens that had been left by the roadside that one of my friends found. And I just looked at them and fell in love with all 3 and decided I was going to adopt all 3 straight away. And the reason one of them is called Miracle is because he wasn't able to, and still isn't able to, stand or walk on his back legs, but he's a little amazing soul that gets around on his front 2 legs really, really well. And his brother and sister are fine, but he has that extra support. But combined, they're 3 beautiful little entities, like you say, that have brought that closeness and friendship to a different level, haven't they?
Oh, completely undescribable. When you and I meet up a couple of days a week, sometimes 3 times a week for a pizza and watching Netflix or whatever, just sort of reminiscing about the good old days, and just immersing in that. You can guarantee that 99.9% of the time, right in the middle of that is a certain putty cat or 3.
Absolutely. And they've been really, really instrumental in helping me with my own sense of well-being. And I suppose at times when people sometimes feel that they're alone or lonely, it's a good idea to think about maybe adopting a pet or 2. What would you say to that?
I think it's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, people do. But I think the love is, we need a channel for love, don't we? This kind of goes back to what I suggested earlier on. We need a channel for love because we are naturally loved. And I think if we've not got that kind of playground to exercise our, and channel that love into, we can lose our way. I certainly lost my way for many years. So I think to have a pet, another soul, to love, and particularly with cats, what they give you back and everything. I mean, it's just, it's life changing, because as we know, flying off at another tangent on another thread, loneliness can be a killer.
Absolutely, it can. And I'm not saying it should be a substitute either if you do decide to get a pet for closing off to the potential of having your heart open again, ready for a new relationship, because I think sometimes people do become disenchantized with the relationships, don't they? And then they probably already have pets or get a pet and then decide that's enough. And I think, that can be enough for some people. But I just think it's sad that if they've done that because they're closed off to having love with a significant other person.
Yeah. Yeah. And just going back at this, this is another attempt at humour, but just going back about, kind of when people are parting, how do you do it? I've already alluded to the humour. Humour's massive, and that can be a bit kind of counterintuitive. When things are falling apart, particularly if one party's cheated and the hurt is really, really massive. So I'm not over sort of simplifying this or, suggesting it's easy, but there has to be something in the middle, something. And I think just one of the phrases that I use regularly in my life now, and it's kind of, rather than getting heavy and the fact that I do need to totally take responsibility for my life, my actions, my thoughts, everything, if I do something, inverted commas, wrong, I'll say to Lyn, for example, now look what you've made me do. Just that humorous way of saying, you know what, I need to take responsibility for this. But it's a very gentle way of kind of flirting with the blame thing that our subconscious seems to want to do. And so long as it's said humorously and communicated in a way that both parties know that actually what he's really saying is, yeah, I've got it wrong again, Paul. And it just diffuses, doesn't it? So humour's massive. And I'll repeat, listeners, I'm not being insensitive when I say that, it ain't that simple. But I think the first thing we do when we are thinking of of parting, of separating, what is that third party middle ground that we can pour ourselves into, rather than directly lashing out at the individual, because it becomes an us v them war then.
Absolutely. And you know, we all have to look at ourselves, like you say, in the dynamic, and acknowledge that, you know, we do all have our own part to play in a relationship, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, don't we?
So have we got time to talk about the love box and the concept? Because this kind of aligns with everything that we've just been speaking about.
Yeah, I think we've got a few minutes.
Yeah, okay. So my thought around the love box is this. I think it was Tony Robbins that coined the phrase, well, not the phrase, but he gave the insight that most people go into a relationship for what they can get out of it. And most people go into a relationship looking for the perfect love. It does not exist. We co-create it. So how do we co-create it? So this really got me thinking, and it's like, okay, what if there was this third thing, that's neither me nor you, but it's something that is ours? So imagine a shoebox, for example. Now, some people save their money in a shoebox, or it doesn't matter what the box is, but this third thing. So rather than us taking, you know, say we was putting £100 a week in a piece, rather than taking money out, we would be putting money in. Because if we keep taking, imagine there's £1,000 in that love box, and one party just keeps taking it out and taking it out and taking it out, there's going to be nothing left. There's going to be nothing left. So we have to look to what we can put in. And there's no judgment on this. There's no, well, I put 100 in this week and you haven't put anything in. You give unconditionally without expectation of return. And so that's on an easy one to assess, because that's financial. Surely the parallel's the same with emotions. What about if there was a love box where we just gave unconditionally? Now, there is a saturation point with that, because a one-sided relationship where one party's just giving is eventually going to create resentment. So for me, this love box is a great concept, and one that I personally will put in place in my next relationship, to say, look, let's create this love box, and unequivocally, let's just give. What you want to put in is up to you. What I want to put in is just going to be unconditional. I will give everything I can. And that way you don't become emotionally or financially bankrupt, because it's coming from a place of trust and giving rather than lack and fear.
Well said. Yeah, totally support that, and resonate with it, and intend to adopt that same strategy in my next relationship too. So for the benefit of listeners, Paul, what's your best contact information if they want to reach out or connect with you?
Just have a look at the World Game Changers websites, which is www.worldgamechangers.org. You'll find ways to reach out there. So that's probably the best one.
Okay then, and any final words of wisdom around this fascinating topic of how to consciously uncouple?
I've already said it, but it's worth repeating. We'll discuss it for 2 minutes and decide I was right.
Typical. And on that note, I'll leave you listeners with true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group 2 Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.